Wine Wars, the show with four friends who love three things: wine and Star Wars.
Welcome to Wine Wars. You're joining us as we sniff, sip, and talk about wine, live from Fisher King Winery today, for the time being in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin, my old stomping grounds, about 3-4 blocks from where I used to live. With me, as always, is Amy.
Hello.
And Jason.
Buongiorno.
I am your penultimate host, Scott. Unfortunately, Anne could not join us today. She has difficulty with away games.
That's right.
Her schedules make it a little difficult right now, but she will be back.
And this is our first show that we've ever done from the workroom,
where the magic happens.
We're smelling the fermentation happening right now.
And
it's kind of awesome. Kind of
We're
very
winerying.
Cool. We're winerying so hard right now.
So joining us today from Fisher King, owner, winemaker, man who makes it all happen, Fitz from Fisher King. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, hi. Glad to be here. Glad to be here. This is my winery. I'm glad you guys showed up.
Before we get into too much, tell us a little bit of the background of Fisher King. It's opened after I moved back to Madison, so when I lived here, I wasn't able to visit. So.
Right. Well, we opened Fisher King Winery in 2011. We got the doors open for retail sales September 2011. So this past September, we had our 5-year anniversary. Mm-hmm. And actually, I guess my story is, I started making wine many years ago. Both my parents are European. Mm-hmm. My dad just recently passed, but he was Irish, and my mom is German, off the boat. And I remember, sipping wine at age 6 at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. At age 6, I really didn't think much of it, my delicate little taste buds. But it was just kind of like part of our family culture. It's that sort of European attitude. Mm-hmm. And no big deal, no taboo, no, weirdness about it. Just it was there. And in fact, I remember when I was, I think it was 8 or 10, my parents took me and my sister on a multi-month long driving tour around Europe in a little VW microbus, and we were camping, car camping. And I remember I have this memory of showing up at this one campsite on the Italian Riviera in this one little Italian town. I don't remember the town, but it was just weird. It's not like camping we do here in Wisconsin. It was not out in the woods or anything. It was right down on the shore, mm-hmm. surrounded by buildings, and a little river was there and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. But I remember about that is that the milk at the local little store was actually more expensive than the wine. So guess what we were drinking?
Nice. I want to camp like that.
No kidding.
So, but anyway, so then when I went into high school, I remember I actually approached my mom at one point and said, "So what is all this about wine and winemaking, and how do you make wine, and what's this all about?" Yeah. And in her Teutonic way, she still speaks with a very thick German accent. She shook her finger at me, and she still does that. She's 85 now, but she said, "Well, go buy a book, go buy some equipment, go learn how to make wine."
You couldn't Google it back then.
I couldn't. No, there was no Google back then. Absolutely not. That would have been in the early 70s. But anyway, so it's kind of ironic that here's this mother telling a teenage high school kid to go out and make alcoholic beverages. Mm-hmm. But I did. I went out and I started learning about it. And of course, my standards were a lot lower back then.
Yeah, weren't all of ours.
Anything that wasn't bad was drinkable. Mm-hmm. So, and then from there, I just went on. I went on and I got a biology degree, which has been very helpful here at the winery, mm-hmm. Since, let's face it, after all, fermentation is a biochemical process. Sure. And the more you understand that and feel comfortable working with it and aren't intimidated by the chemistry or the laboratory things you should be doing, the more likely it is you're going to make really good wine. But anyway, so I got my biology degree and I continued to make wine when I was in college. Actually, for a little while in college, I switched over to beer because, it's cheaper and it's faster. Yeah. And I don't want to accidentally insult any beer brewers, really, some brewmasters. But to me, it's kind of like you can have some flaws with beer, and unless they're really big fatal flaws, it's still drinkable stuff.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. It kind of covers it up a little bit, that maltiness. Mm-hmm. But with wine, I actually switched back to wine when I got out of college, and then went on to grad school and all of that, because I actually found it to be more of a challenge. Mm-hmm. If there's a flaw in wine, it's right there for everybody to notice. Yep. And so it's a little more, for me, it's a little more of a challenge.
Where did you go to school?
I went to an engineering school in Massachusetts, Worcester Polytech, and got my bachelor's degree. And then I went to the Eisenberg School of Management. After that, I worked in the workplace for about 6 years, and then went back and got an executive MBA type thing at the School of Management at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst.
And were you making wine that whole time?
Yeah, pretty much on and off. Yeah, yep. It was always just a hobby.
Yeah.
And then when that got done, I moved to Wisconsin. That was out in New England. And I dragged my sorry rear end all the way out to the Midwest to this place called Wisconsin. And
Pourquoi?
Pourquoi? This isn't French wine.
Oh.
Well, okay, all right, that's a good question, but let me ask you this. What possible good reason would a young man pull up his roots and pack his worldly possessions in a U-Haul trailer and hook them onto the back of his little Subaru and head west to this place he barely even heard of, Wisconsin? What possible good reason would it be?
I have one guess.
I have one.
Same reason why I ended up here.
Yeah. You did it backwards.
Yeah.
For love.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. I ask that question to people, and they often say, "Oh, a job?" And I'm like, "Oh, what other possible reason? I had to check something out. I had to see if it was going to work." Yeah. So, and the woman who I came out to see at that time, I knew from as a person I knew growing up out there, and things started out as just, she was just a girl when I was really young, and then things morphed into other things, and things like that. Yeah.
Some other chemistry happened.
Other chemistry happened, and there you go. So now, and that person has since become my wife, and we have a family and 2 kids here. So
That's great.
But anyway, so that's why I came out, and all the time I kept working either as a VP or a director of marketing for biotech companies and engineering firms and science-based, like instrument companies, things like that. And I kept making wine the whole time, and I started taking winemaking courses. Like I got involved in the UC Davis certificate program in wine production and things like that.
Did you do that via mail, or how?
Yeah, that was a distance learning thing.
Okay.
But and I went off to places, down in southern Illinois. I worked down there for a little bit, and I went over to Michigan State University. And I hobnobbed with winemakers, and I expanded my, abilities and whatnot. And it was always just this sort of thing in the background that was kind of a passion. Mm-hmm. And I discovered that I got to be, quite frankly, in my 50s, and it was like that country western song, "Is that all there is, my friends?" I just suddenly realized, I got tired of keeping the boss happy, playing company politics, egos, agendas, all that stuff, building up my enthusiasm to market products and services that just weren't, that's why they paid me.
Right.
They weren't that interesting to me, but I did it because I got paid this nice paycheck.
Sure.
And I just finally reached a point where I said, well, I've been hobnobbing with winemakers, and I've been thinking about a winery and dreaming about opening a winery, and if I don't do it now, it's going to be a lot harder in my 60s. Yeah. And it ain't happening in my 70s. Mm-hmm. And so as we all of us, even though you guys are, younger than I am, as we all keep marching along, you can't help but see that timeline kind of compress.
Totally.
And they haven't figured out a cure for it yet. I haven't heard of one, No. So it's like... Nanobots, there you go. Star Wars.
Midi-chlorians or whatever.
Midi-chlorians.
Or whatever.
We don't speak of those.
But anyway, so I just decided if I don't do it now, I'm not... So I just walked away.
Cool.
Yeah.
I just walked away and I
followed your dream.
And that was 2011 when you did that, or?
Well, that was more like around. I created the winery as an entity in 2009.
Okay.
And then I worked on a business plan through 2010, and then raised some money and dumped, unfortunately, way too much of my own money into here. And we finally then did the build out in 2011, and we opened here late in 2011. And so we've been off to the races since then.
Yeah.
So this is a custom build?
Well, this is an existing building here. This is an older downtown building. But then, we had to rehab it and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, when we first moved in here, the place was a pit.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a pit. It was just a dumping ground. But you know what? This building that we're in here in Mount Horeb, was originally, well, I don't know if it was originally, but early on in its days, like in the 50s and 60s, it was a car dealership, a Ford dealership. A little teeny weeny Ford dealership. I mean, compared to today's terms,
Yeah.
like you think
Like
of
just
smart
a small
Toyota,
showroom.
or
Yeah.
they could only just barely fit in 2 cars up front. And this back here, where we had the tanks, we have the tanks, was where they did oil repair, oil changes and engine repair and things like that.
Hence the garage door, maybe?
Hence the big garage door over there.
Very cool.
The poured floors, the drains, the high ceilings, all that stuff is required for a production area because of our tanks. And if it weren't a Ford dealership back in the day, it wouldn't have been a winery today.
Yeah, that's cool.
Very
So, I mean, you can find retail space, downtown Main Street retail space, especially in this economy. But to have this multi-use, it's hard to find such a multi-use type old building already there that could be converted into the use of a winery. So,
Yeah, and obviously for listeners who didn't live in Mount Horeb for a while, it's a small little town. It's mostly Norwegian.
well, there is a lot of
Scandinavian?
Norwegian, Scandinavian heritage, but it's actually a mishmash of different.
for sure.
There's plenty of Swiss and other.
But the downtown's kind of cool, old brick buildings, and it's got that kind of small town Swedish vibe.
What do you think
to
there
it.
are 20,000 people in Mount Horeb?
7,000.
7,000. I was off by a factor of 3.
Yeah. But maybe tell us more about what you liked about the space that you're looking towards now.
Right, we are moving.
Yes. So
Yeah, just in case anybody
let's
didn't
not
know
wax.
that, we are moving.
Wait, let's plug that right away.
Yeah.
Since so they're doing a Kickstarter.
Yeah, we sure are. We're scraping to get all the funds together to be able to make this happen.
Yeah,
So-
can't be a cheap endeavor.
No.
How much bigger is the facility you're looking at moving into?
It's almost twice as large. It's almost twice the square footage. Not quite, but and there's room to expand further in the future if we need to. But basically, we've been, we were off to the races in September 2011. Obviously, when we started out with sales starting from zero and a lot of expenditures being made, this is a complex kind of capital-intensive business. And we have high inventory costs because of all the wine,
Right.
and it takes so long to make the wine. It sits
Right.
there. It's low turn.
Yeah, so we're in a room with maybe, I don't know, 1,000 gallons of wine? How much you
quite
got
a bit
here?
more than that.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, you probably right here. You got pretty close to 7,000 or 8,000 gallons.
Oh, is it?
I love that we're this close to this much wine. It's just making me really happy right now.
How much do each of these tanks hold?
Well, they vary in size.
Sure.
The one that's right near you there is around 330 gallons.
Okay.
And the stainless steel tanks back there, like number 6 up there, that is about 1,100 gallons.
What's in number 6?
What's in number 6? I think
Good
that's
question.
Marquette.
Okay.
I believe that's Marquette, but I would have to actually walk over there and look at the tank notes and see what's in there. Because we move things around quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
you know,
Gotcha.
from one tank to another. So.
I see some notes scribbled on tape. I see the St. Pepin.
Yep, that's St. Pepin. That's a local grape. Part of Fisher King's big niche and our forte is that we make most of our production from locally grown Wisconsin grapes. The cold hardy hybrid grapes that can survive our cold upper Midwest winters. All the grapes, most of the grapes that people are much more familiar with, the grapes of Europe, they're referred to as Vitis vinifera. They, more people are familiar with them because that's when people came over from Europe and colonized the U.S. That's what they brought with them. That's what they knew. Things like Cabernet, Chardonnay, Riesling, Pinot Noir, things like that. They all require a much more temperate growing zone.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so, there are some that it's approaching that we might be able to grow them here sometime in the future.
Right.
But the problem is, even if they're on the fence, on the borderline, all it takes is just a few too many polar vortices in a given winter, and
Right.
it'll wipe out the whole field.
Yeah.
And you got to start over, and it's a long-term crop. It's not an annual or anything. It
Yeah.
takes time.
And there's no real way you would have to build a heating space over it throughout the winter, right?
Well,
Almost like a greenhouse.
Right.
kinda?
Yeah,
That's
but
kinda
you
what
can't
I'm
really. They're not
It's
that
not
kind
feasible.
of crop. Yeah, I
Right.
mean it's a perennial and it's a vine and it's like a tree. It takes
Sure.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it's 30 below for a week.
I would
just
say that
can't.
it's best to take advantage of the wonderful research and and activities that are going on in the major viticultural research schools around the country, but most notably in the upper Midwest. Every 2 or 3 years, they're releasing another 1 or 2 brand new varietal hybrids that they've crossbred between, genetically combined with all kinds of different grapes. Like, okay, so one of the nicest, newer hybrids that came out is Marquette. And Marquette it's more complicated than this when you look at the whole big genetic map that made up what is a Marquette, what they crossed. But in essence, it's a combination of Frontenac, which is an older hybrid that's been around for many, many years, has really great flavor, it's very cold hardy, very vigorous grower, but it does have some negatives, it has some challenges. Most notably is just about every time Frontenac comes in at harvest time, no matter how long it's ripened or how much sugar is in the fruit or anything, it always has almost always has elevated acidity. So it's very tart, way above the range of a normal wine. So that limits what a winemaker can do with it.
Sure.
And it limits what you can do. A winemaker has to mitigate that somehow. And there's ways we can do that.
You have to blend with it then? Or what do you do?
Well, there's different ways of dealing with it.
Sure.
One thing is to just do what you can to start lowering the acid while it's in the winery, but then you can also use it as a blending grape.
Sure.
So often it's used as a blending grape, or it's used in things where it's sweetened up quite a bit. We use it in our port, for example. Okay.
Well, that makes sense.
But anyway, that's Frontenac. But Frontenac has been genetically crossed with, drumroll,
Merlot?
Pinot Noir.
Oh, because it's called Marquette, I figured there's some crossover.
No, Pinot Noir.
Okay.
Well, there's no accounting for naming, but and it's been a huge. It's like our #1 selling white wine and red wine. I'm sorry. And in fact, we sold out of it. We had a very large quantity that we put together last year. It's very delicious. It's what I was drinking at home, and
The Marquette was?
Yeah. And about 2 or 3 months ago, we totally sold out.
Oh, wow.
We're about ready to bottle at least some of the new vintage.
We're sitting next to a big tank of it.
Right there.
Yeah, that's the 2015. That's,
We're going to put this
part
on
of what we're
pause
gonna be
now,
bottling.
and we're going to go get some Marquette.
Yeah, go right over there. So we're really looking forward to getting that back out in the bottle and to people.
And that's something, so like you said, the Midwest is a totally different growing environment. So I'm familiar with these because I do some home winemaking as well, so Foch and all these, but most people outside of the Midwest probably never get to try these.
Yeah, you get a lot of that.
Yeah.
But
So
which
how do
is
you-
really convenient that you ship to certain areas outside of Wisconsin.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
If you were, where would you go if you wanted to buy your wines? What's your website?
It's FisherKingWinery.com.
Yeah.
And there's Fisher is Fisher. There's no C in there. And we have an online shopping cart type thing.
Perfect. We're currently drinking the cab. It's a really well balanced, beautiful cab.
Yep.
What's the vintage on this?
This is 2014. We've been working on this since 2014.
Yeah.
It's been a long way coming. But it really, when we finally realized that it was at a point where it was terrific and it was good to bottle, it was long overdue. I was really chomping at the bit to get this one out.
So where do you source those grapes from then?
We actually I have a relationship with a vineyard out in Washington State on the eastern slope of the Columbia Valley, AVA.
That's why it's amazing.
And
Well, it is different
Yeah.
than a California cab.
No, it doesn't have like that over-the-top jamminess that a lot of California cabs have.
It's much more subtle. Plays with the oak.
it was obscenely expensive and inefficient to schlep giant crates of grapes in a refrigerated reefer truck over the Rockies to here. I mean, it's just ridiculous. If I could make a Wisconsin-grown cab, I wouldn't a heartbeat. Sure.
Yeah.
But if I wanted a cab on the shelf, at least I could get it from a good source. And but that's why we try to make most of our wine from here.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can find a wine that you like, that tastes good, and if it tastes good, it is good. That's the only criteria. But if you find a wine that you really like, that is, the grapes are grown 30 miles from here, the wine is made right here in south central Wisconsin, you're enjoying it here, why routinely go and buy wine from far, far away?
Right.
I mean, I like a good California cab every once in a while.
Sure.
But you know what? They're a dime a dozen. You can go find them anywhere, everywhere.
Yeah.
When you got a hankering for a wine like that, go out to the local liquor store or even the gas station and get a cab.
Right.
But if you're, if you like the wines that we produce here now, the types of grapes that the Cold Hardy hybrid grapes are, they tend to be very fruity, fruit forward, and they tend to be a little higher in acidity, a little elevated acidity. So, but it's our own distinct terroir. It's what we can grow here.
Yep.
Right.
And there are you can absolutely, positively create a very drinkable, balanced, delicious, and in fact, award-winning wine. Award-winning not just at the local, barbecue and chicken together, but I mean award-winning at like places like New York City and San Diego and Sonoma and places like that in big competitions. Wisconsin wines are holding their own from the local grapes. Whether the grapes are made from grapes grown, whether the wine is made from grapes grown here, or whether they're from grapes brought in from elsewhere. But our wine industry is really booming right now in Wisconsin.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's cool to hear.
Well, in the year 2000, we had a grand total of around 13 permitted wineries in the entire state. That's it.
13.
Just 13.
Okay.
Lucky
Which is like we were behind just about everybody, even then,
Sure.
with our wineries. You fast forward to the present, and we have over 130 permitted wineries. So in 15 years, it's just gone right up,
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
cool.
And the number of vineyards has followed, like a predator-prey thing in biology, right?
Supply
I
and
guess
demand.
the wineries are the prey.
We're going to pounce on all of your grapes.
Yeah, but the vineyards are coming along. There's more acreage planted every year. There's more new vineyards opening up. We don't have the vast tracts of vineyards like you see out in western New York State or California, but they're more in pockets.
Yeah.
But
So the local grapes, what part of Wisconsin do you get those from?
well, I'm pretty much getting them all from the southern third of the state.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of the wines here that we make that are from grapes grown right here in Dane County. Our Trolltown Red was Dane County Foch. That's another one we sold out of, but we'll be bringing it back. Although, since we're moving, and we're moving, by the way, to Verona, Wisconsin, from Mount Horeb, just 15 minutes closer to Madison. I don't know if we're going to keep calling it Trolltown at that point.
Yeah.
But
might have
It's a nice
to.
homage, though.
Yeah,
To,
it is, but it's like now that we're going to be in new digs, I got to try to figure out something with Verona in it or something.
Yeah.
do they don't have? They don't have a theme.
They don't.
Well, they do. I think, isn't it? I'm not sure. Sorry for people in Verona if I'm not getting this right, but is it hometown USA or something like
Is it?
that?
I don't know.
I don't know, something like that. Anyway,
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have a contest.
Yeah. Until then, keep the troll down.
Yeah.
so but anyway, so that's.
So you alluded to some of the awards. So what were some of those awards that you have won?
Well, we've won, plenty of silvers, but certainly golds, double golds, best in class. And again, that's from the New York International Wine Competition. We've taken golds and double golds at several American Wine Society national competitions. That's actually a pretty big one because that's the group that trains the judges to judge other competitions.
Oh, cool.
So when we do well there, we know that we're doing pretty good. That our wine is, we're holding our own on a bigger stage.
And are you sending the same like vintage and bottles to those, or the same?
No.
Different.
Oh
types
yeah,
of-
yeah.
Just whatever drinking best at the time.
Well, it's like whatever I feel is a real quality wine, and we have it here, and I can get it off to them. And,
Yeah.
Very cool.
San Diego International Wine Competition, a couple different competitions we did very well in Sonoma. A lot of different things around. And also in 2015, we were awarded the Wisconsin Winery of the Year at the New York International Wine Competition.
Very cool.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
that was pretty cool.
That's
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, and also
Take that, Wollersheim.
no.
Just kidding, we love Wollersheim, too.
Yeah. No. Those guys are very good. We're the friends of ours. We're
Yeah, I'm
supportive of each other.
Just friendly camaraderie, right?
Well, it is. Yeah, actually, it is kind of like that. For the vast majority of wineries, there's always one or two that don't act that way, that are like the opposite.
Yeah.
But I guess in any industry you're going to get that. But by and large, the vast majority of the wineries in Wisconsin, the people I work with, it's like yes, we view each other as competitors, but it's not really. It's mostly, like a fraternity of people
Yeah.
helping each other.
Well, a rising tide lifts all ships.
Correct,
right?
and that's how we view it.
That's
We're all
great.
trying to elevate the Wisconsin wine industry. So, and in fact, I was on the founding board of the Wisconsin Grape Growers Association prior to 2008. We were probably the only state in the union that didn't have our own Grape Growers Association.
Oh.
And just a bunch of us growers got together and just made it happen. And now I've been on the board of the Wisconsin Winery Association for 5 years, and now I'm board president. So at a time when I actually, in some ways, I kind of wished I hadn't, because it's a hard-working board. There's a lot of stuff to do.
Right.
It's not like just some title board where you get to go off on junkets.
Well, and with the move, you've got so much on your
Yeah,
plate.
with the move, I'm like, it's like, oh my God, should I really have, become president of the Wisconsin Winery? So, anyway. It's fine. It's a good organization, good people on it, and our industry, since there are so many of us now, we're really moving. Where there's a lot of things going on, and we're working on a lot of different fronts to improve our industry and grow the business here in Wisconsin.
So is there any kind of direction going towards, so like California, they have all the AVAs and all the designated regions and stuff like that, and you have to have like 70% cab to call it a cab or something like that. Is there any...
Well, those are federal regs.
Okay, is there any movement with that in Wisconsin, or are we kind of the Wild West that way, where you can kind of, it's open with however you
Well,
want?
no, it's a very regulated industry.
Is it?
So, and the primary regulatory agency is the U.S. Treasury Department. The TTB, as they're referred to by acronym.
Oh, so they can collect the taxes on the correct
Their
products.
primary motivation is to collect taxes,
Oh, they just
excise
love putting
tax.
their hands in the pockets.
And the higher the alcohol, the higher the tax.
That's correct, the rate, yes. But they also get themselves involved in other things like, truth in advertising and wine quality for the consumer. And so, in fact, every single wine label that we have, maybe you didn't know this, I'm not sure,
No.
but anytime you have a bottle of wine and there's a label on it, a unique, distinct label,
Yep.
that has to get approved by the TTB before you can do it, before you can print it and put it on. And there's a lot of, regulations and restrictions and control things in place for that. So for example, like you mentioned, it has to be 70% cab for it to be called cab. It's more complicated than that. If you started going through if you ever tried to get a label approved through TTB, your eyes would cross, and you'd be reaching for a bottle of wine quick, because it just gets to be such a crazy thing. But yeah, there are requirements. So you can't call something a cab unless it is actually, in the case of varietal, it has to be 75%.
Okay.
But there's other restrictions that make it more restricted. Like there are certain things that you have to have 85% of a certain thing to be happening in the wine.
Dependent upon the grape, or?
It depends on the grape. It depends on the vintage, the location, the AVA.
Wow. I can see that.
It's a real
You can't blend across vintage and
right.
call it
It's a
20
mesh.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a matrix of different things.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah. So it's not so much a Wisconsin versus California type thing. I mean, the only thing that we could maybe do here, in Wisconsin, which would be our own sort of self-imposed thing, would be to be able to say, provide a certificate or whatever, or a stamp that says if it's at least this much percent Wisconsin grown grapes
official.
are used in it. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like so Italy has that on the side of each neck. They have their, what do they call those? Little
Denominacion.
Yeah, stuff like that.
So I mean, there's been talk about that, about doing something like that. So, but it's
just more work.
Yeah. I'm sorry, am I giving you the wrong impression of my job?
Well, it just seems like just an extra hoop to have to go through, right?
It's a business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So we are moving to Verona, as
Yeah.
I have mentioned several times now.
Yeah.
And
When people hop onto Kickstarter, what should they search for to chip in a few dollars to help you out?
well, when you go to the Kickstarter page, there's in the sort of like the upper right corner, there's a search button, and they should just type in Fisher King Winery, and it'll get you there.
Great.
And because if I tried to rattle off the whole URL,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it would be like
We'll put a link on our show notes.
Yeah. But we're moving for several reasons. Ostensibly, the underlying original motivation was that our commercial lease is up this year, and the landlord has decided that he wants to use the building for his and other purposes.
He's got a car dealership he wants to put in.
Yeah, no, not quite. But anyway, it has nothing to do with the winery, as far as I can tell. It's really more just he just has other designs on the building.
Sure.
And so that was unfortunate because I would like to have stayed here for another year or two before having to uproot. But I looked at it as it's kind of a blessing in disguise if we can get it to work, because we're out of room.
Right.
I mean, we keep making and selling more wine every year, which is a good thing.
Well, you were saying earlier, you really don't have any room to put any more gigantic tanks of wine.
Right. We cannot.
We're stuck.
I mean, we might be able to squeeze in one more tank, but then we're already crammed for space. When we're trying to do something back here, and I have a great winemaker who assists me here, Bill Lancaster, who's formerly a beer brewer. But he's tiptoed over to the dark side now. He's embraced the dark side. But he, when he wants to go and do something, or if I'm out here working on something, you'll waste 45 minutes just playing a game of Jenga, just moving things around to get to do what you want to do. So we're really, as far as production goes, and certainly for the near future, we're out of room. And so that's on the production side. On the retail side, we're also out of room. I mean, right now, we're self-limiting. Because the size of that retail space, we're turning business away. We have music here, live music every Friday night, often on Saturday nights. And if there's a popular musician or a good crowd or whatever, it's standing room only.
Yeah.
And I hate it when I'm up in the tasting room, helping, watching people come and go and doing things. And I look over at the door and a group of 6 people show up. They get to the door, they look in, and they turn around and walk back out.
Yeah.
Because there's no room to stand or sit. And
the musician hates that too.
Yeah, but they do. And for all I know, they came from the east side of Madison or something. So they made a little trek, and they just didn't realize, that they had to get here early.
Right.
And also, I'm turning away a lot of event business. I mean, I just got a call the other day from someone who they had 80 people, and they wanted to see if we could host a wedding reception. They wanted to do a little wedding reception for 4 or 5 hours in a winery.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Right.
I couldn't do it. I don't have the room.
Yeah.
And even if I could squeeze them in, I would have to close the winery and they wanted, of course, on a Friday night, which is not a good night for that. So the new place is, hopefully, as far as I can tell, it's kind of solving a lot of those problems.
Yeah.
Because we have a significantly larger tasting room. We have a separate event space that can be cordoned off. We have an outdoor wine patio for when the weather's nice.
Yay! We do have nice weather for 5 months.
We'll be getting in there, December, and it's like it'll be a little while before we actually can take advantage of the wine patio.
We'll be there.
Okay, good. Well, we're closer to you now.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other
You're kind
advantage.
of close to, from the map, it looks like you're close to the Wisconsin Brewing Company.
Yeah.
A little north of that.
Yep, we're right near Wisconsin Brewing Company. There's a good synergy there.
That's good.
There's a new distillery that's slated to come in shortly to us.
Cool.
Looks like there's going to be a Hyatt
Central
to sleep at.
Well, the Hyatt, yeah, right. He's just going to crawl across the
Take an
street.
Uber.
It's like, I think it's more than 160 rooms, and it's like 2/3 done. So that'll be opening really soon. That's our next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
That's
we're right
good.
behind, so we're in that Liberty Park that's right, like kind of more or less on the corner of PB and M,
Yep.
just south of 151 off the highway in Verona.
I've been wondering what the heck is going to go in there, so that's good to know that this is happening.
Yeah. So I'm thinking closer to Madison, more room, nice new building, event space, things like
Yeah,
that.
more
room to
opportunities,
grow.
less
Yeah.
turning people away.
Right.
No turning people away. You'll have plenty of room.
Yeah.
So
that's where we really want to grow. We want to grow more on the retail side. We want to, have people come in and enjoy our place as a congregating place and a destination to go to. We do also sell our wine through distributed sales. We self-distribute. And we're like in 140 retail outlets within a radius around Madison. And we hope to kind of expand that. But really, we really recognize the value in the retail business and to make it a real welcoming place for people to come in and enjoy the wine. And I'm going to have a sip of wine now.
You should do that. You've been talking too much.
You guys have been sipping and sipping and sipping. And
Amy's done.
This is why we do this.
Well.
You talk,
We drink.
we listen.
So do you crush on site
Yes.
as well? Okay. And then do you use any? Do you like use specific yeasts, or do you do any wild yeasts, or
No.
all so very controlled?
Well, yeah. I mean, because you have to control some of these things if you want a consistent product or a good product.
Right.
With a rogue wild yeast, you never know what you're going to get.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like the old days before people knew anything about winemaking or fermentation.
Yeah.
You know, they left the juice in a bucket with the lid off, and then talk about swings in vintage quality.
Yeah, right.
So no, we try to avoid rogue yeast.
Yeah, and it's such a, relatively speaking, it's a small production size, so you can't really gamble like that with a wild yeast. So.
Well, and I mean, you know, you go into it's a science. It's an art too, but it's a science. And even the selection of the yeast is a big deal because you want to pick a yeast that not only, you know, on its basic form is compatible with the type of wine you have and the metrics of it, like the acidity and things like that, sugar content. But there are different wine yeasts all the wine yeasts that are out there, or at least the vast majority of them, are all based on yeasts that were isolated in the vineyard, wild yeasts. And over many, many, many years of having them in the lab and growing them up and isolating them and purifying them and then running them through testing them out in juice to see what happens. Are they good? Do they get a stuck ferment? Are they sensitive? Are they very susceptible to a low nitrogen component in the wine or things like that? And also, what sort of byproducts do they produce? Because it isn't just the fermentation that goes on, it's biochemistry, and they are putting out all kinds of other artifacts and compounds as a result of their much more complex metabolism than just the fermentation. So, in the end, you know, why not take advantage of what all these people before us have worked so long and hard on, is to select a yeast that will produce the qualities of a wine, potentially, that you're desiring to have. So just leaving it open, you're as likely to get vinegar as you are, because of Acetobacter or something floating in the air, as you are a really nice wine.
My dad calls that the Christopher Columbus approach, where you're just trying stuff and going, or you could, you know, take a roadmap that's already been figured out.
Right.
You know, probably get a better result really quickly.
I mean, in the end, you want to produce a wine that people enjoy to drink.
Right.
And so that you can sell it, so that you can pay all the rest of the bills, and you can buy more grapes the next year to make more.
Right.
Yeah. So,
let me ask you, I have two questions.
Yeah.
Number one, I guess I'll go with the less nerdy question first. If you were going to buy, if somebody's listening to this and is interested in buying a wine from you guys, what would you say, this is a great representation of the wine, check out this wine, we're really proud of this wine.
And like the local terroir?
Yeah, well, anything. What are you most proud of that is available?
well, again, on the reds, I really like the Marquette, but right now
It's gone.
Well, it's gone. Right. You didn't act fast enough. We are planning to bottle more Marquette within the next 2 to 3 weeks, though. So it will be out.
2-3 weeks.
So actually, I'm sorry, from today. But you said something like this might be airing in early November.
This will air in 2 weeks.
Okay, so around November 2nd, 9th.
Yep.
Okay, so shortly after this would air, there probably will be Marquette available. I can't give you a guarantee because you never can tell what might happen, but I think we're on a track right now. We're running it through filtration. So I think the Marquette will be available. And that's personally my favorite.
Well, that's what you're drinking at home, right?
Right, yeah.
So
There's a
I
testimonial.
want what
He
you're having.
He just brings the thing in. What's that called?
The Wine Thief.
Wine Thief, that's right. Yeah. He just Wine Thief's over.
Yeah.
I gotta go.
I gotta go to the office.
So,
What about for whites? Is there anything that like just screams Wisconsin?
well, I think that there's two whites that we have that are really, really nice, and they're made from Wisconsin-grown grapes.
Mm-hmm.
One is the St. Pepin, and the other one is the White Whisper. And the St. Pepin is made from the St. Pepin grape. Mm-hmm. And the White Whisper is made from basically kind of for lack of a better term, sort of a mutation of Frontenac. It's called Frontenac Gris. Mm-hmm. And there's also a Frontenac Blanc out there, which is lighter. Mm-hmm. But Frontenac Gris, people were noticing them when they were planting Frontenac, that some of the grapes would be coming out much lighter in color. Still sort of a dark bluish grape, but often lighter and more striated. And so they started isolating that, and it turns out that actually makes a white wine. And so The White Whisper is very nice. It's more earthy. It's more savory. The St. Pepin is really gorgeous. I love St. Pepin. It's a lovely grape. It's a noble grape.
Does it have any connection to Pepin, Wisconsin, where Laura Ingalls Wilder is from?
Well,
Because that's where I nerd out.
I'm sure in the grand scheme of things, there's
She may have drank some.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she wouldn't have. No. All right. Wisconsin is actually, I don't know if you want to say the word blessed, but we have the unique honor that there's a person who used to live in Wisconsin because unfortunately he has now passed, but who is basically, in many respects, arguably the founding father of cold climate northern viticulture. He had his own vineyard up in Hudson, Wisconsin, so not far from La Crosse,
right.
Up in that area. And I think it was something like 6 or 8 acres or something like that. And he was like a little Mendel of the vineyard because he went in and he cross-pollinated all kinds of different grapes. Everything from river grapes and fence line grapes with vinifera, classic grapes of Europe, with other hybrids, with Native American grapes of other types like the Concord group and things like that. And he created almost, not quite, but nearly 24 unique varieties that can survive our cold winters, and that's what comes from the wild grapes. But the wild grapes typically don't make, I'm telling you, despite what some people do out there with wild grapes, they don't really make good wine. They have some challenges, too many challenges with them in my opinion. But he crossed those things together and they can survive the winter and they can make decent wine. And one of those grapes is the St. Pepin. And he has a number of them, St. Croix, La Crosse, La Crescent.
Yep.
A lot of those grapes are all his original grapes that are still out there and still being used.
Yeah.
And he has the absolute most quintessential Wisconsin name. Are you ready for this?
Give it to us.
Go for it.
Elmer Svensson.
Oh my gosh, that is so Wisconsin.
It might as well be Jan Janssen, right? But Elmer Svensson, and he passed, and his grapes are still around today, and they're being built on and being used in other combinations and activities to try to.
So was he doing that back in like the 50s, or when was he doing that?
Certainly the 70s and 80s.
70s and 80s, okay.
Probably the 60s. I guess I'd have to go look it up exactly.
Sure.
But he passed probably 10 or 15 years ago.
And there's some of his St. Pepin right there, huh?
And that would be
cool.
his St. Pepin.
Aw.
Yeah,
That's very cool.
So anyway, so that's about as authentic Wisconsin as you can get.
Yeah.
And it tastes good too.
Yeah.
It's a little sweeter. The wine, well, you don't have to have it as a sweet wine, but we have it with a little bit of residual sugar left in it. So it's not super sweet, but it's got some sweetness.
Yeah.
Really delicious flavors though.
I bet it's great with cheese
It is good with cheese.
because of the sweetness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It helps offset some of the stronger pungent flavors of cheese.
For a home winemaker, so you've expanded from home winemaker and done all the study and have expanded a business. What would be the couple of things that you would recommend a newbie winemaker to do
Like a couple
in terms
of tips for home
like whether
winemakers?
it's the right equipment, whether it's a couple of things that were epiphanies for you that were, whoa, that was like the next breaking point for you where your quality got better.
Well, most home winemakers, if they're doing it any sort of halfway decent job, will recognize, just like with beer brewing, that cleanliness and sanitation is critical. So, I mean, here in this much larger facility than your basement with 5-gallon carboys, we're spending probably 70 or 80% of our time cleaning and sanitizing, and 20% or whatever, 30% of actual technical winemaking.
Boring.
Yes, well, it is. But that's
the key.
That's
the job.
That's the deal.
Yeah.
The other thing I would highly recommend for a home winemaker is to learn about and get a really good handle on sulfite management, because it's more than just following a recipe from a book that says drop 2 Camden tablets into a thing at this time, and then after you've racked, drop another one in, or whatever it might be saying. That's a black box, and there's actually a whole bunch of science behind that, and it's not that complicated. You need to be able to, the best thing that you can do, and of course there's a lot of debate out there about sulfites and how terrible they are or not. I know. I don't.
We did a whole episode on sulfites.
Right. And believe me, I would tell you all about that because I'm very opinionated about that.
Yeah.
But sulfites are the winemaker's friend. You use them in very, very small, responsible quantities. They break apart as soon as you've introduced them into the wine. They start falling apart and not being effective anymore, precipitating out. So sulfite management to maintain a low level of sulfite at the appropriate level is absolutely critical. And being able to measure the sulfite that's in your wine at any given time is really key to producing a good wine. And it's pH dependent, so you need to get a pH meter. You need to have a reliable way of testing the sulfite level that's in your wine at any given time, the free sulfite, the available sulfite, to do the work that it's meant to do. And the one thing I will say about sulfite, without getting into a whole big treatise on sulfites, is that the reason sulfite is a winemaker's friend, in essence, is because when grapes come in off the field, or you're getting juice, but typically that comes from grapes, they are covered with thousands of different types of bacteria and fungi and yeasts and molds because it's off the farm. And it's just literally teeming with all these organisms that like to chew on grapes and eat sugars and other compounds in the grapes. That's where the original high-quality wine yeast came from or isolated from. This stuff comes in, and you're crushing it and pressing it or whatever, and you're getting into a tank, and you're trying to get a desirable, good wine yeast to take over and do what you want it to do. It's got to outcompete against all those other wild organisms. And all those other wild organisms are highly sensitive to very small levels of sulfite. The wild yeast will be wiped down, will be knocked down in its population, allowing the good wine yeast to really flourish. The good wine yeast has been raised in a low level of sulfite environment. So it's somewhat, not completely, but it's somewhat sulfite resistant. So at the lower levels that we even apply sulfites, basically it's a competition assay. And you want the good wine yeast to have every advantage to outcompete the wild, rogue, crazy yeast that are going to do bad things or bacteria or whatever to your wine and give it off flavors or turn it or things like that. It's not a sterile system. It's not an aseptic type arrangement, but there's no P4 hood here where it's only the one good wine yeast that's in the wine, that's it. You're having the wine yeast outcompete all the other things that come along with it. And so maintaining that low level of sulfite at a level that will continue to keep those things knocked down and let the wine yeast do what it's supposed to do is critical. Once you get it going with fermentation, you want to make sure that there is a little bit of a low level of sulfite, in there to, And then after the fact too, once fermentation is done, post-fermentation, you do want to, that helps protect the wine so that the organisms are still there. They're still in there, and you just don't want them to take off and start taking over because that's, you leave a bottle of wine open on your counter at home for too long, it's going to turn to vinegar. Because everything's in the air, gets into it, the organisms that are in there start activating, there's things in there that they can chew on, especially if there's sugar in the wine, but also alcohol. Alcohol's a food source. So basically, the only thing I'm saying is it's not complicated, but you're advised to take some steps to try to figure out how to and engage good sulfite management. It'll be the difference between night and day with your home wine.
Cool. Awesome. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
I think it's.
And I actually have a book I would recommend to a home winemaker.
Cool.
Oh.
So I found this helpful when I got going. It's certainly not adequate for all the stuff we do here, but it's a really good, solid book. It doesn't cover quite everything, but it's pretty darn good. It's called The Way to Make Wine. It's by Sheridan Warrick, Warrick, and I'd have to look to see what press it's out of, but I'm sure you can find this around. University of California Press. It's just a really good. You can see I've got it, dog-eared and flagged with little things.
Napkins, I love it.
Cool.
This goes back to my home winemaking roots. But if you were to go through this book and follow a lot of the things that are in here, you're on your way to becoming a full-fledged, card-carrying winemaker.
I'll try to find and put a link on our website or on the show notes as well if we can find it. I haven't seen that one before. That's interesting.
Scott has like 50 wine books, so.
Really?
Yeah, that's not one of
Have
them.
that one.
My goodness, you don't have this one?
I don't have that
and
one.
You make wine in your basement?
I do. All right, Fitz, thank you so much for coming chatting with us again. You can follow Fisher King on Twitter at Fisher King, but no E. It's FISHR.
Right. And go to Kickstarter.
Go to Kickstarter. We'll put a link on our show notes and our website. You can visit fisherkingwinery.com. There's also a link to their Kickstarter on their website.
There's no limit to how much you can kickstart.
No,
You
I
can go
know.
$5.
$5?
You can go $200,000, whatever you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did notice at I think it's $100 mark. I was looking at it yesterday. You get your name kind of put up on kind of a plaque or something.
Right,
like that.
right.
So
Memorialized.
if
I
you-
mean, permanent,
Yeah.
recognition in our new tasting room that
So-
you were a supporter of the winery.
So if you're visiting Fisher King, 6 months in the future, you might go see our name put up there on the wall. So
That's right. All right, good. Great.
and you can follow us on Twitter at Wine Wars Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Leave a review on iTunes and Stitcher. That would really help us out. Get our numbers up. And we'll give you a shout out on a future episode. Again, Fitz, thank you so much. So that's it for Wine Wars this week. Until next time, remember.
It's just grape juice.